There's scenes today on both sides of the Atlantic. This, of course, is Armistice Day in the UK, when the country commemorates the end of the First World War. You're looking at Queen Camilla there, meeting some of the current veterans. A little earlier, the UK paused for 2 minutes of silence to mark the moment when the guns on the Western Front fell silent in 1918. And this, of course, is known as Veterans Day in the United States. President Donald Trump there placing a wreath at Arlington National Cemetery a short time ago. He was leading the 72nd Annual National Veterans Day observance, honoring the men and women who have served and continue to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces. Well, a CNN exclusive investigation reveals a growing culture of misogyny inside the U.S. military. CNN reporters spoke to more than a dozen active duty women in various branches of the military who expressed alarm that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's policies and words are pushing women out of U.S. forces. Hegseth has removed women from key leadership roles and put in place new fitness standards that could be seen as a barrier to women in combat.
Our female officers and NCOs are the absolute best in the world. But when it comes to any job that requires physical power to perform in combat, those physical standards must be high and gender neutral. If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is. Basic training is being restored to what it should be: scary, tough, and disciplined. We're empowering drill sergeants to instill healthy fear in new recruits, ensuring that future warfighters are forged.
Well, time now for the exchange, and joining us to talk about this is McGrath. She was the first woman to fly a combat mission in an FA-18 jet for the U.S. Marines. She's also a Democratic candidate for the Senate for the state of Kentucky in next year's midterm elections. Great to have you with us, and thanks so much for your service.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So today is Veterans Day, honoring the men and women who serve. As a combat veteran, just tell us what this day means to you.
It's a special day in America. And this morning I got a chance to go to my children's school, my son's high school, and give a talk about Veterans Day and what it really means. And it's about service to our country for the men and women who, sign on the dotted line and potentially go overseas and go and do very dangerous things to fight and defend our country. And we swear an oath to the Constitution, not to a man and not to a political party, but to a belief and to our country. And that's very special.
Of course, you were one of the first generation of women to serve in combat roles. You've flown combat missions in Afghanistan and Iraq. How have you seen the opportunities and the expectations for women evolve over the last few years?
Well, the last few years up until this year have been very good. In the last, I would say, 20 to 25 years for women. When I first joined, there weren't many women. Not all the doors were open for women. We couldn't serve in all positions. When I came in, we could barely serve as pilots. And I was one of the first in fighter aviation in the Marine Corps. By the time that I retired, all jobs have been open to women. But what we've seen in the last year or so, since this Trump administration has come into office, is a lying about women in the military, a lying about standards, and somehow saying that women have lowered standards for our military. And that's just an insult to all of us who have served and have met the combat standards that have always been equal in our country.
And someone who's spoken about those standards and whether or not they've been lowered is, of course, the Defense Secretary, Hegseth. We know that about 18% of the U.S. military is made up by women. What does it signal to you that Hegseth is reshuffling leadership and applying these new fitness standards? And what does it suggest to you about the signal he sends about, the role and the value of women in the armed forces?
Yeah, so I think the first most important piece to talk about is the fact that combat standards have always been gender neutral. So when the Secretary of Defense implies that they have been somehow lowered and we're raising them, it's just wrong. It's just not the truth. Since combat jobs have been open for qualified women, there have only been one standard for those jobs. It was true for artillery, infantry, tanks, submarines. It was true in my case of flying fighter jets. There was never a men's or a woman's standard. I think what you're seeing happening in the Department of Defense right now is the firing of qualified people based on gender. We have a Secretary of Defense who does not like women. He wrote an entire book about how he doesn't like and is insecure with serving with women in the military. He himself was never promoted past the rank of mid-grade rank in the Army National Guard. He never qualified in some of the more elite training programs that some women have qualified in. And, nothing says thank you to the 1.7 million women veterans than stopping the promotion of qualified women who are in the service right now. And that, unfortunately, is what our Secretary of Defense is doing.
You make some very valid points. Retired Marine fighter pilot Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath, appreciate your time today. Thank you very much on this Veterans Day.